First thing you want to do is start off with the ostinato. The ostinato is the thing that does not change. It's just a repetitive little pattern that you're going to do. In this case, it's going to be eighth notes. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Next thing you want to do is figure out what limb you want to be able to improvise with. So in this case, I want to be able to improvise with my snare hand. So what you can do to practice this is set a metronome and just sit there and play the ostinato pattern, whether it's something as simple as this, and then just like move objects around, like take some pennies, put them on your snare, make a little house with them, draw some different shapes, or you can even like sign your name with this hand, or even try talking while playing this, etc. You're just trying to get it so that your brain can think about something other than whatever the ostinato is. It might be something as simple as this, might be more complicated like this. Whatever the ostinato is, doesn't matter. Start with this step where you're just playing one thing, and then you are talking or doing something else with your hand to make it so that you can develop some sort of independence from that. Once you get that down, then we go back into the permutations, which you can find here. Under the limb independence permutations and exercises, you would then play the ostinato pattern while reading through some of the stuff on here. So it might be something as simple as the eighth note permutations or something more complicated like the 16th note permutations. Every one of these play-alongs, you can slow it down. In this case, this one goes as slow as 40 beats a minute or as fast as 200. And you can jump to whatever BPM you want in the timestamps. So when playing through this, you're going to maintain the ostinato that you're working on. In this case, it might be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. This play along will count you off. You'll play the ostinato pattern for the very first line. You'll do it twice because there's a repeat right here. And then you will read through the patterns on here. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 3 and 4 and, etc., going through that whole thing. Once you can play through the ostinato pattern, then work on the limb independence play along charts. So again, these are organized so you can go slow to fast, and it's straight or swung. So I'm going to go to the straight charts, and let's just say I wanted to play this at, I don't know, 120 or something. You could go and pick any one of these charts. Just click on a chart, you scroll down into the timestamps and the BPM, and you say, I want to play this at 120, and then it's going to count you off. Now what you'll do is you'll actually read through this while playing through it. So in this case, the first line is going to be just playing the ostinato pattern, maybe improvising, whatever you want to do for each one of the charts, and then you just read through it. Once you can play through all these different charts, each one of these has a set of 5. So if we read through this, there's chart 22, there's chart 23, chart 24, and then chart 25. Once you can get through this, well, guess what? There's like 50 more that you can go through, and I'm going to be adding more over the coming months, so stay tuned for more. Okay, so that was step 3. Now, step 4 is to repeat that same process with a different limb. So start off with 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and then 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and go through the different permutations of the patterns in here with another limb, like in this case, the bass drum. Once you get that down, then go to the next step, which was to play through the charts with just the bass drum and the ostinato. Whatever. Then we get into the fancy stuff. So the next step, once you have independence with one limb, like the snare drum, and then an independence with the other limb, like the bass drum, then you can combine the two and do something called short-long. So as an example of how you can work on short-long for this, so we have the long notes are going to be on the bass drum, which are the quarter notes and dotted quarter notes, etc. And the short notes, which are the eighth notes, are going to be on the snare drum. So in this case, with chart number 6, it goes... So you can also flip it so that you have the short notes on the bass drum and the longer notes on the snare drums, and that's how you can get some different variations on here. Once you can read through this with short, long, whether you're playing the short on the snare and long on the bass or vice versa, or whatever limb it is that you're going to be working on, the next step is to actually start alternating between different patterns. So for example, you could play through a pattern, like let's say you're doing jazz, and you're reading through it. And then go back to the original pattern. So each one of the lines, you can play a completely different groove. In this case, I was playing just this typical 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a short. Short is going to be on the snare drum and the long on the bass drum. And then the second pattern that I was playing is I was actually playing short notes on the tom, filling with snare ghost. The long notes were on the bass drum and the ride. 1, playing 2 and 4 on the hi-hat, etc. You can pick something simpler than that, but you're going to go one line is going to be one pattern, the next line is going to be another pattern, and you just keep switching back and forth. This is going to make it so that you can play whatever you want with any limb and be able to change your styles, etc. while you are working on this. So I highly recommend following those different steps to work on this. But now let's actually talk about some different patterns that you can play. A very basic jazz pattern is to play ride cymbal with 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you read everything on the snare drum. A more complicated version of that is you can combine it so it's short on the snare, long on the bass drum. So here's another one. So you play 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You read on the tom while you fill in ghost notes on the snare as triplets. Triplet, 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 triplet. An even more complicated version of that is you then put the long notes on the bass drum and the ride or crash, whatever you want, and the short notes on the tom while still filling in triplets and still playing 2 and 4 on here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You can play some different styles as well. So for example, earlier I was doing rock, so you could play 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 while you read. Etc. So that's a very basic way that you can learn how to improvise and develop the limb independence with your foot while playing a very basic rock pattern. If you want to get more complicated with it, you could use one hand and you could actually play 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And when you're doing this, you can keep the wrist same angle like you would if you were playing on like tenor drums, or you could use like Julie Spencer technique where you actually flip your wrist over, whatever you want to do. So you're playing 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and then you go through all the steps that I outlined earlier, and you improvise with the foot. If you want to get it a little more complicated, fill it in. Etc. So then you can start improvising with like diddles on the hi-hat with the 16th notes that are on there, or maybe even moving it over to the snare. So then you're improvising not only with the left limb, but also the foot as well. If you want another like rock-ish or funk-ish pattern, depending on how fast or slow you play it, play a paradiddle, and then like a permutated paradiddle. So you're gonna go left, right, right, left. So paradiddle, left, right, right, left. And just emphasize beat 2. Like this. And if you want, you can put a little ride bell hit on 1. Like that. So that's a fun pattern that you can play slow or fast. You can also do some like Latin different beats. So for example, a really fun one that I absolutely love playing is called Baião pattern. So you go right, left, both. Right, left, both. Right, left, both. And you 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a. On the ride, you could even play it like this. And then read through a pattern with the snare drum. Here's another example of a jazz one that you can play. So you're playing 1, 2, 3, 4 while you're playing alternating triplets on the snare. You read through the patterns while emphasizing it with accents. Now to make it even more complicated, you could then make it so that the long notes are on the bass drum, as well as either the ride or the crash, depending on which hand it falls on. So for example, if we just have quarter note patterns, so 1, 2, 3, 4, you play it like this. And then to make it even more complicated, you can put a double stroke or a diddle on each one of the taps. So now, instead of playing like this, you're gonna go. Which again, does not sound great on the drum module, but I promised I know how to do a diddle. Interesting one is you can actually play a Bossa Nova pattern, which is kind of like a slow samba. While you play, for the quarter notes, the long notes, you play a paradiddle. And then for the shorter eighth notes, you actually just play alternating 16th notes while emphasizing the eighth note. And then for the dotted quarter notes, like I was just playing, you play a paradiddle diddle. Another Bossa Nova pattern that you can do is you can actually play it so that you have the short notes on the snare, the long notes on the tom. In this case, I'll just play it here because I got my mouse and keyboard on there. So you play short notes on the snare and the long notes. On whatever tom you want, etc. You can also put it so that you have okay, so here's one of my favorite ones, actually. This pattern is a really weird one. So you're playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 in your hand. Typical swung pattern, okay? Nothing weird about that. Now, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 on your feet until it finally lines up while you read the pattern in 4/4. That's a fun one that you can work on for jazz. If you happen to be playing anything in 3/4, you can keep that pattern in 4/4, and it really messes with your brain. And if you talk while doing it, then you're technically doing 5-way independence. So if you're still speaking while you're able to like read through the patterns, then explode your brain right there. Here's a basic rock pattern. So you go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and while you read through the pattern with the foot. And then you can even switch it. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so now you have hi-hat on the downbeat, ride is on the offbeat. If you want to do like disco or some EDM, you could also even play a basic while you read through the patterns with the foot. Another Baião pattern that you can play is you can actually read through the patterns on the bell. So the long notes on the bell, short notes on here, while you fill in eighth note, ghost notes on the snare drum. So if you have a long note, you're actually playing like that. So here's a basic reggae pattern that you can play. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and while you read through the pattern on the snare, etc. So that's a very simple reggae pattern that you can do. So 3 excellent books that you can use to be able to develop your limb independence. New Breed 2, and then 50 Ways of Syncopation. So this one's by Don Moyle, and the other 2 is by Gary Chester. But you can find a link to these books on my website. So if you go to the lessons tips section, the very first link where it says books and gear I recommend, you can go here, and then scroll through whether it's concert snare or drum kit books, mallets, whatever, as well as like sticks. Even like if you want, you can find the pedal that I'm using. And the books that I'm recommending for developing limb independence are New Breed 2, and then Don Moyle's book, 50 Ways of Syncopation. I highly recommend those specifically for limb independence. These other ones are a little bit better for other things, so they're also good. But the play-alongs, if you scroll down into the limb independence permutations, this is where you can work on the different permutations while playing rhythmically precise. But then we've also got the charts here that go from 40 all the way up to 240, both straight and swung. And again, all these charts are available for free. They're YouTube videos, and so you can play along with these.